If you've watched any of our speaker setup videos that talk about placement in regular rooms, in odd-shaped rooms, toe-in, and all those other aspects of setting up your speakers, you've heard me refer to using certain setup or test tracks. One thing that I haven't done is gone through some of the albums that I use when I'm setting up a pair of speakers in a new room. And it's a wide variety of different types of music, but basically what you want to keep in mind is the biggest changes that you're going to make by adjusting placement and toe-in to some extent are in the bass performance of your speakers in the room, and also the imaging and sound staging. So how big the sound appears to be, or how much focus you have on individual vocalists and instruments in a recording. So the recordings that I typically use excel in these areas. They either have excellent bass, great soundstage, great imaging, or all of those things. Now, one thing I do want to mention is that you shouldn't necessarily listen to just these sorts of albums. I'm sure many of you will watch this video and say, oh, that's not the kind of music I listen to. That's a very, very important point. At the end of the day, it's your speakers, your system, your room, and your music. So you have to be happy with the performance of the types of music you listen to. Now, I'll also point out that much of what I'm going to show today, I've created a Spotify playlist, and we'll share that in the comments below, a link to that playlist, so you can actually check out some of these things with your own system for yourself and see what you're hearing, and play with things like placement and toe-in and see how they affect the performance of these recordings. So the first thing that I'm going to point out is a test disc, test CD, something that's got test tones, either sine tones or warble tones. The one in the Spotify playlist that we've linked is very good because it has warble tones at different frequencies. Why is this useful? Well, if you're going to listen for improvement in changing the location of your speakers and how it interacts with the bass modes and nodes in your room, having a way that you can precisely hear at specific frequencies how that's being impacted is important. Even better, with distinct test tones at different low frequency points, along with a sound level meter, if you happen to have one, means that you can actually draft out and plot what the bass measurement looks like in your room. Now, that's really important because sometimes bass is very tricky, because depending on your listening position, depending on the specific construction of your room, what you have in the room, whether it's carpeted, etc., can all impact this. So a test disc and test tones, very, very helpful for setup, particularly looking at what the bass is doing. The next recording is Holly Cole's Temptation. Now, Holly Cole's albums, if you're not familiar with her, she's a Canadian vocalist. They're all very well known for being extremely well recorded. Temptation is very interesting because it's minimal backing, it's piano, bass, and drums, and sometimes percussion behind her voice. Her voice is in a fairly low range, so if you've got too much boominess in the setup of your speakers, you'll hear it right away with her vocals. The track Temptation is very minimal, with some percussion that's almost like bongo drums, with very, very low subterranean acoustic double bass. It's a great, great test track. Every instrument should appear in its own point in space and clearly defined when you've got your setup right. The next album, another Canadian artist or Canadian band, is Cowboy Junkies, the Trinity Session. This is another famous recording in a number of respects. It was done in an old church in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, and all of the performers are positioned around a special omnidirectional microphone, and they're actually in a very, very natural acoustic space. There's a wide variety of different instrumentation on this album, and Margot Timmins' vocals can sound thin and screechy if your system is not set up right. The intro track, Mining for Gold, is her a cappella with the natural noise and reverberation of the church that she's singing in. It's an incredible test for good imaging, and I've been listening to this album and using it as a setup album pretty much since it came out in the 80s. Another track, again with a female vocalist, you're going to see a theme. This is Joan Baez, Farewell Angelina. It's her doing an album of Bob Dylan covers. It's very well done. I like it, musically even more than the sonic quality. But again, it's minimal instrumentation, very, very well defined and well recorded, good bottom end. And again, you should be able to listen to a recording like this when your speakers are set up properly and actually close your eyes and clearly tell where Joan Baez is, where the different instruments are, and they shouldn't waver. You should have a natural acoustic perspective around each instrument if things are set up right. The next album, and I'm sure I'll just show the cover, and I think most of you know what this is. This is, of course, Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon. Now, it's a pop recording, but of course, it was done in a time where everything was analog. Even the synthesizers used on this were analog. So there's a certain tone and warmth to the recording, whether you have an LP like this or whether you have a compact disc or even listen to it on streaming services. There are very, very complex, dense moments in this. If you know the beginning of Time, if you know Money, all of these tracks have ping pong effects, but the acoustic is very natural. Everything should sound very nicely balanced with a good weighty bottom end. I mean, the bass is thunderous. This has been used as a test track in stereo stores since it came out in the early 70s. So it's a very, very good track. Again, a lot of you are going to go, oh, it's boomer music, I want something more modern. Just listen to it if you don't like the music from the sound perspective. It's very good helping setting up. If the heartbeats that start the beginning of the album sound too boomy and thumpy, change the position. They should be weighty and full, but well defined at the same time. The next disc, a jazz album, a famous one, Time Out by the Dave Brubeck Quartet, with the famous track Take 5 on it. Now, most people, if you start playing Take 5, they'll know it immediately, even if they can't tell you what it is. It's a famous track. What also is very, very well known about this album is the recording quality. It's absolutely stunning. The cymbals and the bass drum on this recording are so natural that it's an incredibly tough test for any audio system. If you can reproduce it well, it sounds like you're in a jazz club with these wonderful musicians. If everything is a little washed out, ill-defined, or it's tending to clump towards the center between the speakers, you don't have your toe end set up right. Try adjusting it until you get a wide space and perspective between the different instruments. It's a great recording for that. Now, turning to a classical piece, this is Carl Orff's Carmina Burana. This recording is on Deutsche Grammophon, but there are many, many good recordings of this piece. On Telarc had a great one on CD that might be on streaming services. I couldn't find it on Spotify, so this is the one that's on the Spotify playlist. But it's a very, very complex, heavily orchestrated piece of music, full symphony orchestra. There's solo vocalists, there's an entire massed choir. And this is a real good recording for putting on and seeing, does everything completely fall apart when it gets really loud and raucous? Or can you clearly still hear the different sections of the orchestra, the choir, the soloists, all in their own individual space with weighty, nicely balanced bottom end? The double basses and cellos should not drown out everything else. If they do, check your speaker placement. Pull them out from the walls a little bit to try and deaden the bass in your room. It's a great recording. Now, this next one, you're probably not going to find on any streaming services. There was a small Swedish audiophile label called Opus 3. I think they are actually still around. And they had a series of first LPs and then CD reissues that were all looking at different parts of listening. This one is the depth of image. I also have the original LP here, test record 1. Number 2 in the series was timbre or timbre, depending on how you like to pronounce it, which looks at the different sounds and structure of different instruments. Now these recordings, I think there were 4 or 5 in the series. They're a little hard to find now, but you know what? If you're really into tweaking the last percent or two to try and get your system at its utmost, track these down. The Depth of Image album in particular is just incredible. There are tracks on here with complex pan pipes or pan flutes that bounce from the left to right channel, and they're complex to reproduce tonally, but just as complex to get that imaging working well. So, I mean, these are torture tests. If I set up a system and I listen to this album and it sounds really, really good, and the soundstage on every track is excellent, the imaging well defined, I'm done. I'm finished. I don't have to tweak anymore. I'm going to just enjoy listening to my music. Now, the last two I don't have. One of them, the next one we'll talk about, AC/DC's Back in Black. Yeah, I'm sure some of you were going, are you going to play any real music, some metal, some hard rock? You going to suggest anything like that? Absolutely. AC/DC's Back in Black, believe it or not, was an incredibly well-recorded album. Incredibly well-recorded. It's dense, it's thick, but it's layered. The instruments all sound fantastic. And you know what? It's an important album that you should listen to. I have copies on both CD and LP, and when you have thousands of both like I do, sometimes you can't find them, but everybody knows the cover. It's on the Spotify playlist. Check it out. Everything should sound dense, but it shouldn't sound all mashed together when your setup is right. And then the final album that I'm going to mention is a modern one. It's the latest Billie Eilish album. And I know there's been a lot of talk in the audiophile community on music and audio forums about how the bass is really distorted on this album. Well, yeah, it is, but it was done for effect. It was done on purpose. But amongst that very, very heavy, dense, distorted sounding bass are some fantastic vocals, some fantastic effects. It's a heavily produced album, so, you know, there's a lot of studio trickery going on, but you know what? It actually is one of the best recordings from a top 40 artist in the last number of years that I would say is really, really well recorded. And very hard to reproduce because you have a lot of very dense, heavy bass going on with Billie's vocals at the same time. And again, they should be distinct, shouldn't sound like a mishmash of things. And it's really a great recording to check out. I'm sure many of you have listened to it and are going, wow, I didn't even think that that could be something to help with my speaker setup. But it's really, really a great recording. So please give me some comments down below if you'd like. If you have albums or CDs or streaming cuts that you use for setup, share them below. Not just for my benefit, but for everyone else who watches this video. It's very interesting to see what people use for their speaker setup and their system setup. So please share that. Check out the Spotify playlist. Like I said, most of what I've talked about in this video is on that playlist, so you can check the tracks out for yourselves. And you know, if you've got problems, if you listen to some of these tracks and go, geez, that sounds really this or really that, and is that right? Again, comment below, ask. I'll make sure to keep watch of the comments and answer when I can. So thank you very much for watching, and enjoy these tracks.